All right, kids, it's time. Written in My Own Heart's Blood by Diana Gabaldon. It's time for a book chat. I'm sure you can already tell this is super long. In my heart, I feel like it's going to be an hour and a half. We'll see how close I am to being right or not. I have 6 pages of notes on my Surface right here, which I will be referencing because it took me 2.5 hours to write the 6 pages of notes. And I still don't know that I'll hit everything that I want to, but that's what the discussion is for. If this is the first review you're finding of me that I've done, hello, my name is Jen. You're at the Book Refuge. I review books and the Outlander TV show. I've been reading the Outlander books for the last 5 years, so definitely not as long as some of our longest standing fans. And this year I started also reviewing the TV show. I have an entire playlist which will be listed at the end of this video, or you can find it on my profile, with all of my reviews for the big books in Outlander. I will be continuing and reading Lord John novels and the other novellas that Diana has written. I also have other fun content like favorite scenes, favorite episodes, stuff like that, so make sure you check that out. As well as, when this review is over, if you happen to stay for the whole thing and you want to engage more with me, I have a Discord, which if you don't know, it's kind of like a gaming and talking online channel where we can continue to talk about Outlander, and it doesn't just have to be in my comments. There is a book spoilers chat and a TV show spoilers chat if you want to continue. Now that's all the time I'm going to waste on preliminaries because we have a long road ahead. So get yourself a glass of whiskey, relax, and let's have a great time. So yeah, okay. So Written in My Own Heart's Blood came out in 2014, obviously written by the Queen herself. And this book, we have been left on quite the cliffhanger in 3 different ways. As usual, I've never had to read these books where I had a cliffhanger. This is the first one where I had a cliffhanger at the end because I'm young and also foolish, and it took me a long time to read the Outlander book, so I was behind. And oh my gosh, I understand the agony now, right? I always mention like what it was like the first time I read these books because this is a reread for me. I read all these books when I first got into the series 5 years ago and just plowed through them all. And now this is a reread where I'm really starting to try to sift and put things together and pay more attention. And I already know I'm going to need a 3rd and 4th and 5th reread through because there's so much going on. And as you read through this series, I find that each time I have, which this is only the 2nd time rereading this one, but the other books I've read more than twice. But I find each time I read through, I'm more invested in like a different character each time. Like this reread, I've been really invested in Bree, and as well as Ian, young Ian. I'm so invested in him. There's never enough from his POV in my say. I want to read a whole book just about him. I adore him and Rachel and just the things that they're going through right now. I love them so much. I want to spend all the time with them. But anyway, we were left on 3 cliffhangers. So the way that I'm going to go through this book, because it's even different than any one before. They're always a bit different. But this one particularly, it covers the shortest time period besides the first novel, only covering about exactly 1 year of time. But we are in 3 different time periods, as well as there is some main events happening each one. So we really only get a bigger time jump near the end of the novel. So for the most part, things are taking place over the course of about a month in all 3 time zones. About 2 months in where Bree and Roger are, and about a month where Claire and Jamie are, until things start to really jump around. So I'm not really going to do this the way I have done the past 2 or 3 books where I've done it by character and went over what their specific character arcs are. And I'm going to do this one by parts. This one is split into 9 parts. Diana's books are split in anywhere between 6 and 12 parts sometimes. She will split these all up. Usually, and especially in this one, they were kind of split up based on like events that were happening, or either emotional or historical. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'll lay out what the 3 time periods are in the issues, and then I'm going to jump into what's happening with Bree and Roger, and I'm going to cover their whole story first because it's pretty contained, and then we'll go into the parts that are about Jamie and Claire and go from there, and then we'll see how long I've been talking and if I can expound on more by then, because I really refuse to put a video onto YouTube that's longer than an hour and a half. I just can't. So what are the 3 cliffhangers we were left with? Let's go with that. First, we were left with the cliffhanger in June 1778. This is the time period that we have Jamie and Claire. And now at the very end of Echo and the Bone, we found out that Jamie wasn't dead, but there was people chasing him. So Jamie makes it to John's house, where John and Claire have been married recently, and they have slept together, but they were both thinking of Jamie when they did do that. And when Jamie shows up, Claire sees he's alive. William also sees Jamie for the first time in a while and really like sees him. And Jamie fake kidnaps John because there are redcoats there who are going to arrest him. So he fake kidnaps John to get them to let him go. And then, like, we believe that, you know, he's going to let John go as soon as he can. But then John, wanting to make sure that Claire doesn't get in trouble with Jamie, which, I mean, she does, but she doesn't, because Jamie's never going to truly punish Claire for something. He decides to blurt out what had happened, that not only have they married, but they have had sex. In Lord John's glorious way, he says, "I have carnal knowledge of your wife." And Jamie, the last line of the book was, "Oh, why?" And now, you know, they have this. So that's a cliffhanger we're left of there. Remember, I'm not diving into that yet. So that was a cliffhanger. The other cliffhanger is in October of 1980, which is about to be split into 2 times. Because remember, we think Jem has been kidnapped by Rob Cameron. Rob Cameron, pretty cleverly actually, set his truck up at the bottom of the hill of Cranesmere to make it look like he'd taken Jem through, so that Roger and Buck would go back in time looking for Jem. Rob Cameron actually set this up. He actually hasn't left. He's actually kidnapped Jem, but hidden him in the at Bree's work, like hid him in these tunnels there, and he wants to get a hold of the Frenchman's gold, which he found a letter written by Jamie saying that Jem knows where it is, which is true, but that gold is in America, hidden in a hole in the ground, with a dead pirate. We called him a pirate. And, oh my goodness. So this is horrible, because the cliffhanger we're left out with this is that Bree's in danger right now because Rob Cameron's at her house. We don't know where Jem is. And Roger has went back in time with Buck, and he's never going to come back unless he finds Jem, and Jem's not there. So Roger and Buck, they fall back in time to October of 1739, we find out, which is banana balls. So much is going to happen with that. You don't even know. Okay. So those are the 3 cliffhangers we are left with. So let's dive into what's happening with Bree, Jem, and Mandy, and we're going to kind of go through the parts that they're in, okay? So Bree immediately realizes that they're in big trouble, and she realizes that she sent her husband away. Well, she didn't send him. He was going to go find their son, and her son's here. Well, it's great news her son isn't in the past. Now we're stuck here with this crazy guy who, A, of course, tries to rape her right away. B, she's able to knock him out and lock him in the priest hole. But now they need to go find Jem and hopefully get this guy arrested. But what's the crime that they're going to get him arrested for? So we end up going on kind of a little bit of a wild goose chase with this. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, even though the book does give us a good time of this. We get Jem's POV, which is fun. I really love how Jem thinks. I love how Diana writes his head, and we get a little more insight into how he can feel Mandy. So that's something this time through I've really been paying more attention to, is the kind of like, psychic connection that these Mackenzie Fraser kids have with their parents and grandparents. Because if you remember, Jamie, he's had dreams of the kids before, and they had things from the future with them in the rooms, and when he would dream, that Claire or Bree had never told him about, which is kind of fascinating. So that leads into certain theories that people may have about any abilities or just even a knowing that Jamie might have, which is kind of cool. So Jem, also being a smart little boy, he's able to get loose from where he is, and he's able to find his way back to his mother and sister, and then they have a kerfuffle. Like I said, we're not going to do a complete blow-by-blow of the 900 pages, but the end up of this is that they end up going to America to stay with Uncle Joe, Joe Abernathy, which we get a POV of his, which is super cool. And they decide to kind of stay there and recoup and try to decide what to do. As well as we will see Bree kind of add to the Time Traveler's Handbook that her and, that Roger had started, and she's kind of adding to. And during this time, which this is where I had to write some notes on some of these, we find a letter from Frank that Frank wrote when she was, I think, maybe 16. And now this blew my mind because I completely forgot about this letter, that he'd written it, because I get my eyes blinded by Frank hate some days. Like, we know this. I'm guilty of it. I don't care. I don't like him most of the time. And in this letter, Frank has done even more research, which makes sense because he's a historian, and it would have been crazy to believe that he would just, like, stop what he was doing and not continue to look into this James Fraser just because he resented him or didn't want to know. And more so, he looks into things when a document gets brought to him with Claire and Jamie's marriage listed on it, with Claire's original birthday. So 1920, or 1917, right? Yeah, because she was born when the First World started. 1920. 1917. Yep, 1917. I remember. Anyway, whatever. It has her original birthday, and then it has her getting married to Jamie on this family tree, basically. And so, number one, Frank takes this as grudging proof that Claire is telling the truth, because all the years of raising Bree, he's just always kind of thought that she was fucking with him a little bit, or just couldn't bring herself to, like, be honest about it, which is ridiculous, but I'm being generous to Frank in this moment because this letter is fascinating, where he, having been a part of British intelligence during the war and still has connections with that, knows what the government would do, or others, if they could get their hands on someone who could time travel and change events. Now, we probably have our own perspectives of, like, if you could actually change events with this, and the fact that it's so dangerous you don't know if you can make it through every time. But the fact is, he's like, if there are more people than you, if there are enough other people who can travel, there's gonna be people looking into this. And so Frank decided that though he loathed to admit it and wants to hate Jamie Fraser, from what little he's gathered of Claire, he knows that, well, number one, he knows Jamie's alive. Okay, so he knows Jamie's alive. And from the little that he heard about him from Claire, he knows that he was a good man. And so, though he selfishly or unselfishly isn't ready to tell Bree about him, because he writes this letter and hides it, obviously, he also wants Bree to have the option to hide in the past should she need to. And so this explains why Frank teaches her so many of the things he does. He makes sure she's a good shot. He teaches her horseback riding. He teaches her different little survival skills. He takes her camping and fishing. And he teaches her all of these things. And he says, he's like, if anyone ever finds out about you, you may need to hide in the past. And I have to believe that James Fraser will take care of you, if not for your own sake, for your mother's sake. But how could he look at you and not love you? And he says some beautiful things. He says, and you are my daughter forever, but you were sired by another, when he's admitting this. And then he also says, I will love you forever, Brianna, and I know whose child you truly are. Which is beautiful. Like, it's beautiful to write, and the fact that he did all this dive into it and he's trying to protect her. And it leads me into a theory, which I plan to make, if not a whole video, I'm planning to make a theories video soon, you know, while we're in Outlander, for the book and for the TV show, that I have a theory that Frank might not have been leaving Claire just for the reasons he said. Based on this letter, he says in the letter that he will find the person, all people who know about this family tree, and like eliminate them or make sure they're not a threat, using his very military-like language. And I just think this letter's fascinating because he believes that they're in Europe, and then a year or two later, he tells Claire that he's taking Bree and leaving her and moving to Europe. So if I want to have a charitable view of Frank, which I don't often want to, and also do I want to look for other seeds that Diana is putting, because we do know there's 2 more books, and it would be kind of amazing to see time travel wrapped up in a more interesting way, or have there be more to do with, you know, people time traveling purposely, because we haven't seen too many examples of that, and what the government might try to use it for, which is a, you know, there's literally a whole TV show about that called Timeless, if you want to see something like that, or Doctor Who, something like that, right? He could have been taking Bree to, maybe he was ready to tell her who she was and start explaining this, because she's 18 now, and maybe something happened to spook him. And then the night that he tells Claire they're leaving, he dies in a car crash. Now, does he die in that car crash because he's upset, the fight he had with Claire, he gets in an accident, or did someone off Frank? I'm just saying, this time through reading that letter, it gave me some chills, and especially the things we've seen happen, and the more we learn of Frank, we cannot like how he chose to treat Claire, but we can never doubt how much he loved his daughter. And would he have taken her away from danger? Yes. Yes, I think he would. So I just think that's interesting. That's something I wanted to put forth. Also, during this time, Bree ends up finding a letter from Roger that he is able to, you know, leave a clue for her, and he says what time that he's in, and she decides that on December, I'm ripping through all of the Bree stuff, right? I'm going through everything that happens with her. So they stay with Joe for a while. They go over possible plans. We realize that Jem and Mandy can actually sense their parents as well. And so their plan is to go back to the Stones on winter solstice, which will be December 21st, and go through the Stones looking for Roger, and then use the children to find him, basically. Use them as like human Roger detectors to find him. So that ends up being Bree's plan. The other side of this, we see Roger, who, because we know Roger is here fruitlessly, I feel like Diana just wanted to throw every possible person that we would have known in 1739 into this. And it's really fun, but it also is like, oh my God, do we have to see everyone? And yes, we do. So we run into Brian Fraser, our wonderful Jamie's father. We get to see Jenny. We hear that Ian and Jamie are in Paris at this time, so we didn't see young Jamie, which I think just would have been too much for us if Roger would have met Jamie then. We also get to see John Murray, which is Ian Sr.'s dad. We get to see another time traveler who, this one, he came from only like 100 years back in time, is what that seemed. That was really interesting. And this same time traveler, from what I recall, knows Galis. Okay? So Buck, we also meet Dougal. We meet Dougal. And Buck had separated from Roger so they could cover more ground looking for Jem. And we end up meeting Galis, and Buck knows who Galis is because Roger tells him. And Buck lets Galis kiss him and fondle herself in front of him. And Roger's like, Buck, what the actual fuck? This is your mother. And he's like, I know, but I wouldn't have let it go too far. Like, he's literally saying this, and Roger's like, I need to get this guy away from Galis because things are going to happen. It's crazy. So we end up even getting to see Blackjack Randall as he's just taking over Fort William. Roger prays for him, which is such a good scene. It's such a good scene. And then something turns up, and it's actually dog tags. And they say J.W. Mackenzie, which is Roger's dad, who died in the line of duty, but he also disappeared. There is a short story about this, which I'll be reading when I read Wind on the Leaf of All Hallows, I think is that one. And so Roger realizes that he doesn't fully realize this because he doesn't know that Jem didn't come back to this time, but that when he was calling out for a Jeremiah, which we know that this is what happened now because Jem didn't leave the time he was in. He was looking for Jeremiah, and he went to the time where his father also fell back in time. And he actually gets to meet his father, Jerry, who's only 22 and doesn't know what's going on to him. And Roger and Buck help him go back through the stones. And Roger gets a chance to tell him he loves him. And Buck is like, what are you doing? Like, why are you telling him you love him? He doesn't know who you are. And he's like, that's true, but I'm never going to see him again. Whatever happens, I never see him again. And if you've read A Wind on the Leaves of All Hallows, you know what happens. And it's horrible, but we'll save that for the review of that. So now we're just kind of stuck in a weird limbo. Buck has been sick at one point. We've been stuck here for a while. Buck decides that maybe he will risk on the winter solstice, that he will risk going back to the future to check in with Bree and see, if she's heard anything or figured anything out, and then come back again. Because Buck realizes that he never makes it back to his family because it's written that he died at a certain time. But he would rather be with the family that he can be with, and he would do anything he could to protect them. And it's really kind of beautiful. And I can't help wanting this stuff to happen in the TV show. I honestly, after the way some things have went, I can't see us ever getting to this stuff. But especially since they kept Graham McTavish for this to replay Dougal, it would be so cool. Oh my God, it would be so cool if we had Buck, because I love him. The Bree and Roger. Roger ends up finding Jem, and he's like, oh my God, Jem, you're here. And Jem's like, not just me, but Mom and Mandy are here because I never got taken back to the past, Dad. You've been here for no reason. You've just been on this journey to meet all of our favorite people again, and it's been fantastic. And so the last we see of these two, they are making up for lost time and trying to decide where they go from here. So those in the book, I believe that's part 1 and 6, maybe. Because there's a part 1 and 6. Part 2 and 6 are about Bree and Roger. And now let's jump to the longest part. But first I'll say I don't have a ton of comments to say in this video about what was going on with Bree and Roger. I remember the first time through just being very confused about the times and the people and the things that were going on because I didn't have as vast a knowledge of the Outlander universe as I do now. But this time through, it was so much fun to get to see the people, and I feel like the more you've paid attention in the series, the more you know about the genealogy and the past of these people, the more fulfilling those parts of the book are. And there's also some fascinating things to do with time travel and the theories that Diana is playing with that I want to get into in a theories video that I'll make at another time, because this book really, we're dealing with it constantly, and they're just putting together more and more pieces, and the stuff we get about Frank really is fascinating to me. It really is, and I'll be interested to see what happens with that. But this isn't the last we'll see of the Mackenzies in this book, but we're going to leave them for a little while and go back to Jamie and Claire and the rest of the crew in June 1778, where a lot of shit's going to go down. So, like I said at the beginning of this book doesn't take place over 4 or 5 years like some of the previous books. We are really in the heat of the revolution. There is a lot of politics. There's a lot of things pinging around back and forth. The Frasers are tightly entangled in all of this because we have Claire is, married to Lord John Grey and to Jamie at this point. not really to Lord John Grey, but in the eyes of Philadelphia, she's been living as Lady Grey for a while. And in part 1, which is a big chunk of the book, Jamie and Claire still don't get to be reunited. So Jamie and John, after they end up with a tussle because Jamie punches John a couple times, totally fucks up his eye, and John ends up getting captured. Then a kerfuffle happens, and John ends up conscripted into the Continental Army as an unwilling spy because he knows that he'll go back to the British and everything he hears is going to end up with Germain as his boot boy, which is fascinating because Germain runs away to be a part of the army and he ends up in the hands of someone who was his step-grandpa just a little bit ago. And we have Jamie trying to make his way back to Claire, but he can't, like, get at her because she's in this nest of, you know, the British. She's living in John's house. John's older brother is there. William is there. And just all of this is happening all around her. And he can't get at her. Like, he can't get to her. And it's very frustrating. For the first 147 pages of this book, they don't get to be face to face. We're also dealing with William having a temper tantrum. And I know people hate him. People tell me constantly, like, that he's the one that annoys people the most. And I feel the same way about him that I felt about Bree in the beginning. This is the second Fraser kid who is finding out that Jamie is their parent when they thought they had another parent. And when they thought they had another great parent. Because Jamie never gets to just claim kids as his own. It's so frustrating for him. But William is a fraud. And he is finding all of that out. And though nobody else, like, sees it that way, none of his family, nobody who matters thinks of him as a fraud, William can't help it. And he feels lied to and betrayed. And his relationship with John is, well, number one, now that I know the full timeline of this, that's the thing to remember too. All of this drama that happens, like, it happens within about 2 months. So that's not a lot of time to find out who your dad is, to be like all the other issues that he ends up going through right now, and then to come to terms with it. Like, that's not a lot of time. It just feels like it because it's pages and pages of book, and he keeps making some stupid decisions. So the first, like, really annoying decision is that he runs into Ian and Rachel, who've just had some pretty emotional moments. So Ian and Rachel are betrothed, they're engaged, and Ian is confessing to her the problems that him and Emily had having a baby, and that Claire has assured him that they shouldn't have an issue having a baby themselves, but he wanted to be honest with her in case she's afraid to marry him because of that. And, you know, Rachel reassures him. She's like, I'm gonna leave this in God's hands. I want to be with you more than I want fictional kids. She's like, I want kids with you, but I'm not gonna worry about it. And then, so they have this emotional moment. It's really beautiful together. And then they end up running into William. And William is freaking out, okay? This is only the, like, next day. It hasn't even been, like, 12 hours. And William says some stupid shit about Jamie, and it sets Ian off. And so they end up in a fight, which William starts. But also William's jealous because he liked Rachel. He had feelings for Rachel. She didn't reciprocate them, but she's a nice woman for the most part. And so he's a little angry too that he found out this about Jamie, and he finds out Ian is taking Rachel, and also Ian's his cousin, and also it's like another Fraser person taking something away from him. And so he freaks out and he lets Ian, well, he makes Ian be arrested basically, which Rachel does not take kindly to. Rachel immediately freaks out on William and says, you're being an asshole, in her nice way, and is like, you need to go get Ian back right now. And William, he's like, or what? You're a Quaker. What are you going to do about it if I don't? And he, like, stomps off. And so Rachel, being this tiny little fiery thing that she is, she's like, well, fine, I'll go get him back myself. And so she starts marching after the wagon of people that have Ian, and then she runs into Jamie, and, you know, he's trying to make his way back after him and John having a thing in the woods and then losing John and just freaking out. And Rachel tells everything that happened, and then Jamie's like, oh my God, why is my kid causing me problems right now? And so he goes and finds William and says, you're gonna go get Ian out of this. And basically is like, if you have a problem, you have it with me. Like, don't take it out on Ian. And like, William says something to him like, screw you, sir. Like, he's really bitchy about it. And that annoys people, but like, I think it's funny. I think it's funny because there's so much about William that reminds me of Jamie, and there's just things that we'll see more and more come out of him. And he has like all those fiery passions of Jamie and all the things that John has taught him. And he's just a kid. Like, he's just a kid. Well, not just a kid. Like, I think he's like 20, 21 at this point, but he's not very old. And it's just been a lot. And so, well, the things he does, he should apologize for them and not do them. I understand his little bit of lashing out right there. It just is infuriating because we're like, dude, you doubly win. You have both Lord John Grey and James Fraser as your dads. Like, goals. Like, hashtag parental goals. Like, what is your problem? But that's not how he's seeing it. And so you will see it in different scenes we see with William. We see him, you know, at one point he talks to Claire again. He talks to his uncle. He talks to people who they know that Jamie's his father, and they're like, it could be worse, man. Like, there are much worse people that could be your father. And that will all like culminate in the end with a certain thing. But so yes, so then we finally get Jamie and Claire get reunited, and they have a very long talk, and it's pretty intense about her sleeping with John and why she did and what it means, and Jamie sharing like what that means to him and how hard it is for him to hear John say, you know, that he had fucked his wife, and that not only did he fuck his wife, he really wanted to have been fucking Jamie. And Jamie has this like emotional thing with Claire too, where he's like, he saved a part of my soul too. And so to owe him and know that he loves me, and it's something that I can't, you know, it's something that I can't ever fulfill for him because I'm not gay and I don't want him. And it turns into like frustration for Jamie because he loves this man so much as a brother, as a friend, and that's something he's not ever going to fulfill. And so whenever he sees those sides of John, when he sees what John's level of devotion for him is, it makes him sad and angry and pissed and weirded out all at once. And it's just really beautiful. Like, there's a good 10-page scene about this, and then there is Jamie and Claire making love again, and coming back to each other, and Jamie asks her, he's like, are you still my wife? And she's like, I am. So now we'll go on to part 3, which, like I said, part 1 is about everything that happens that I just talked about. Part 2 is Bree and Roger. Part 3, we are getting to some battles, some fighting, some things are happening. So this part of the book is, hold on, we're 3 days after everything that happened in part 1, and Jamie ends up joining the Continental Army as a general. And so he shows up in his blue suit, and he just says, I'm sorry, Sassenach, I had to. And she's like, why does it always have to be you? And it's beautiful and it's painful because Jamie is a leader of men, but he's so over it at this point. But also, they don't have any money, they don't have the preparations or the safety with which to travel back to the Ridge. And so him doing his part and leading men, this is going to be his best chance right now. And Claire's going to go with and be a battle surgeon. And we're also going to have Rachel and Ian with. Ian's going to continue to be an Indian scout for them. And Rachel is going to go along with Claire and Denny to help with the medicaling. There's a cute moment in this part where Rachel and Dottie, they're getting ready to be married to their husbands. Dottie is going to marry Denzel Hunter, who is Rachel's brother, and Rachel's going to marry Ian. And they have a woman's talk about sex, and it's so cute. Just like the different things that Claire teaches them, she's like, and at some point, he's going to call out for God. And that's when you know it's really good. And Dottie's like, I don't think that he'll ever call out for God. That'd be blasphemy. And she's like, no, honey, there's no better time to call out for God when this is happening. And it's so cute. And then we have another sex talk, which is between Ian and Jamie. And Ian is asking about what it's like to be with a virgin. And Jamie, which he never like says this to him, but I mean, Geneva was a virgin, but we don't talk about that. But he's like, Claire, I was actually the virgin when I married Claire. And so he gives him some advice about being gentle. And he's like, you'll do a good job. And Ian asks him when he's leaving, he's like, was Auntie gentle with you? And he's like, hell no. It's so good. I love that shit. Also, John ends up turning himself into Jamie because him and Jamie come face to face, and Jamie's like, oh my God, you're undercover in the Continental Army. And so John turns himself in. He's also in extreme pain because the eye that Jamie punched, there's some problems with it. So Claire has to do like a surgery on his eyeball, which is gross, and it involves sticking honey in his eye. And I was just like, I can't. It's disgusting. Moving along. And then we meet a ton of historical figures. We're seeing Lafayette, Benedict Arnold, Washington. We're just seeing people everywhere, and it's crazy. So then we have part 4, which is June 28th, 1778, which is the Battle of Mammoth in New Jersey. And so this part of the book, it's pretty quick, and it's also has so many different POVs, and it's mostly the men. We don't have many POVs of Claire, so we get mostly the POVs of Ian, William, Jamie, Hal, and John, and then there even Fergus, because he went looking for Germain, and we end up finding Germain, and then Germain is taking care of Lord John while he's in custody now. He's keeping an eye on him, and we just have the events of the battle. We have Ian getting shot and then getting captured and then getting away, and then he gets beat up and left for dead at one point, and we don't notice that he's gone for a while because at the end of part 4, Claire gets shot in the side, and it is the last part of part 4, and so she gets hit. And the other surgeon who's there, we're into part 5 right now, and the other surgeon, who we've had some troubles with him already, he basically is like, just hold this on her, I got stuff to do, bye. And so we have to go find Denny because this guy is a waste of space. So we need to go find Denny to do surgery. Jamie shows what a motherfucking badass he is when General Lee is looking for him, and there's this soldier who's like, sir, General Lee needs you. And he's like, my wife's hurt. And he's like, I'm sorry, sir, he's asking. And so he's like, take off your shirt. So this poor guy takes off his shirt, and then Jamie leans down, scoops up some mud, and writes, I resign my commission, James Fraser. And tells the dude to go show it to General Lee because Jamie is the badass. And he's like, please, sir, please don't make me do this. And he's like, I'm done. I'm staying with my wife. He's like, I want to fight for freedom. Like, I'm here for this, but like, I'm too old for this. And now my wife is hurt again, as she always seems to get hurt when I bring her to these places. And so he resigns his commission on someone's back, which is so awesome. God, I love James Fraser. I love him so much. So Dr. Hunter is able to get there. Denzel, he's able to do the surgery. He has to do it without ether because we don't have time to make it, and it's too crazy to do it anyway. And so Claire's awake for this, and then he packs the wound with cheese. He packs the wound with cheese because it has penicillium mold on it. So her wound gets packed with cheese. That's great. And then when she wakes up, Jamie promises that he's going to take her back to the Ridge as soon as possible. But we have a lot of hurt to go before then. So we still haven't found Ian, so Rollo and Rachel go looking for him. And they are walking between the British camp and the American camp, and she runs into William, who's with Jane and Fanny. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't pay as much attention to this storyline the first time or the second time because I wasn't that interested. Not super interested in William's POV. But the gist of it is that Jane is a prostitute and she has a little sister, and William has been trying to kind of take care of her off and on for the last like 2 books basically. And he also likes Jane. She has tried to offer herself to him as payment many times, and he always turns her down. But he's like, he says in one of his interactions with her, he's like, when this isn't war, when this isn't where I'm not able to take care of you, he's like, I'll take you up on this offer someday. And it gives you that, like, you know that he cares about Fanny. He just doesn't see how it would work right now, especially when she's so determined to be the one taking care of herself. And she's the one who's constantly putting herself in these decisions. She also is a murderer because she killed someone who raped her, and he was a pretty important guy. And so there are also people on the lookout for her, which is going to be bad. So anyway, so Rachel runs into William and these two, and he's trying to get them to a safe place during the battle. And so Rachel says, I need help finding Ian. And so she ends up finding him. And she's like, I will take Fanny and Jane to a group of Quakers that I know who will take care of her if you will carry Ian back to my brother and his family. And so they have a tiff, and he's still kind of being like bitchy to her. And she's like, I'm over this. Like, Ian has saved you before. It's your turn. Just stop, you know. And it's always funny because she uses all the Quaker terms and all these things, but Rachel just doesn't put up with any shit. And so she's like, I need you to do this, and I'm going to do this for you, and just do it. And so William ends up taking Ian back there. He leaves him at the edge of camp, and he's like, you know, you better be good to her. And if you die of this, I'll marry her. And Ian's like, I know you will. I'll make sure I live. And so they kind of have made their peace with each other too, which is good because I want Ian and William to be like brothers. Like, I want it so bad. Like, I just really want that. And I see there being hope for it because of some stuff we'll get to later. So then we get to, hold on. Yes. So then at the end of part 5, we have the weddings. So we have Dottie and Denny get married, and Rachel and Ian get married. And it just, my heart grows 50 million more sizes. I love Ian. I've said this in the last few reviews I've done. He is my Highland dream man right now. I love him. I love his dealings with Rachel. I love how bold Rachel is, and that they just have fun, enthusiastic wedding sex. I love it. I love romance. That's what my channel is mainly about when I'm not doing Outlander reviews. And I just adore these two together, and I'm so happy they are finally having happiness. And I love Dottie and Denzel, and their wedding night, super cute too, because Denny's a virgin as well, but he's read a lot of books about it, and Dottie's asked advice from Claire about it, and both men do definitely call out for God at one point. Then we jump to part 7, the break my fucking heart part. So this is September of 1778 in Philadelphia, and we're working on our plans to go back to the Ridge, but there's a few things we need to do. Jamie needs to find his old press. They need to raise money to do this. They need to be more prepared than they are, and so they're just kind of going through, we just get a little bit of downtime, but then some sad things happen. We lose Rollo. Rachel and Ian wake up one night, and Rollo is dead, and he's died by the fire in the night. And I swear I'm not going to cry about the dog right now, but I did when I read it, and I did when I was writing the notes. I was crying about it because I love him. Rollo has been with us for 12 years, which is crazy. It's crazy. Rollo's been with us for so long. And then, not long after, there's a fire and the print shop burns. Sorry, my lighting just changed. The sun is freaking me out, so change that up. There is a fire at the print shop, and in the chaos of trying to get everyone out, we lose Henry Christian, and he dies pretty tragically. It's super sad, and just, it's time to leave Philadelphia behind and go back to the Ridge and not have to worry about this pain anymore. And man, it's just so hard because I remembered this death, and we also have because Marcelly is pregnant with her 5th child. Rachel is pregnant as well, and we lose Henry Christian, and so it's like we're leaving Philadelphia with a whimper instead of with good memories. And we're really worried about Fergus, so everybody's watching him to make sure he doesn't make another suicide attempt or anything, because he's done that before. And Marcelly is just really upset, but we do have Jenny with now. You know, Jenny has been with the family now since she came back with Jamie, and so it does help to like have her with and to be there. So then we reach part 8, and we are making our way, we're making our way back to the ridge. We're picking up the printing press. We are leaving Marcelly and Fergus in, like, not up in the mountains with us because she's about to give birth. We're traveling with Rachel, who is getting more pregnant, but is, you know, a little more spry than Marcelly and not quite as far along. And, oh my gosh, just every interaction with Ian and Rachel. My heart, my heart. So also we have Dottie. She ended up going with LJG to see her family because they believe that one of her brothers is dead. And now we enter into a part of the story again where it's super confusing to me, and I don't think I understand it super well, and I need to do some more research into it. So anything you tell me about it, I will look it up and see more. But we think that her brother Ben is dead. And so we hear that, and so Ian ends up taking her to be with Lord John Grey, and they're going to go visit their family and see if they can find out, or to pay their respects to him, because they think he's dead. But Hal's pretty sure that he isn't, and he's like, if he is dead, we won't be able to survive. Like, my wife will die, and I'll die with her, because I just can't. Then we have... Also, we have Jane gets taken captive by a friend of Harkness, which is the man that she murdered for assaulting her. And so William goes to Jamie to ask for help, and they don't get there in time. Jane slits her wrists with a broken bottle before they can save her because she refuses to be raped and abused any further. Which is what was going to happen to her. The guy was torturing her, basically. And so it's tragic, and it really breaks William. And this is where what I was saying before, of like, I feel that because we have this scene of him where first he's willing to go ask Jamie for help, and Jamie says, he's like, you have a right to my help, but you're not going to disrespect me, which I love that about Jamie. I love that because he's so understanding. Like, he knows why this is shitty and like why this isn't great. And why William is upset, but he also is like, but you will still treat me with respect because I'm your father. I'm your, you know, sperm donor, whatever. You'll still be respectful. But they don't make it in time, so we have to bury Jane, and then William asked Jamie and Claire to look out for Fanny, so we basically adopt Fanny. And she's coming back to the ridge with us, and then him and Jamie have kind of a confrontation where William asks about his mother and if Jamie had raped his mother. He knows that he was born like exactly 9 months after his mother was married to Lord Ellesmere, and he also knows that Lord Ellesmere was 50 years older than his mother. And so Jamie won't tell him the details of it because he's like, you don't have a right to know that. Just as you wouldn't tell me about your first time with a woman, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to disrespect your mother. And William's like, I've heard that she's a brat. I heard that she was difficult and nobody liked putting up with her. And Jamie, he says something sweet. He's like, she had courage. She was brave and she wanted to make her own choices even when no one wanted to let her. And I love that. I love that Jamie, though because he says it, and William asks, he's like, do you regret it? And Jamie says, he's like, I wish things had gone differently. I wish I'd never met your mother, but I don't regret it, damn you. And so William kind of leaves, but it's a hopeful note because he's trying to process through everything that happened, and this sends him off on a search to find his cousin Ben. And he ends up finding the grave of his cousin, but because of some things that he heard, he doesn't believe that it's Ben's body. He isn't sure. So he digs up this grave, and it's not his cousin Ben. At the same time, John has been told and believes that Ben is dead. So Hal, who is the father of Dottie and Ben and other boys, receives the letter from William saying this grave with Ben's name on it, Ben isn't in it. And we get a letter from John who says he's met a woman who claims to be the widow of Ben and has a son who she claims is Ben's, and that Ben is dead. So Hal gets both of these and he's just like, okay, I don't know what this means. We're going to have to think of this. So then we get to part 9, which is the last part. We make it back to the Ridge. We get to see all of our lovely, wonderful people there. Lizzie Beardsley and her children. And we get to see the other people who live there. And it's so good. Like, it feels so good. Living on the Ridge, like, is what I love about Outlander. That's why I have a picture of them at the Ridge back there. That's what I love. So I was so happy when we came back. And we have a few traumas come up. Claire goes to Brownsville with Jenny, and she ends up seeing one of the men who raped her. And turns out he escaped from Jamie and Ian and them during the raid. And this has been 5 years, by the way. 5 years. And so she decides she wants to work on forgiving this guy because she's tired of being afraid. And also, this particular man who raped her, he was crying and asking for his dead wife while he was raping Claire. So in comparison to all the other people who'd raped her, she kind of just, like, this guy was the lesser of evils in her mind. Like, even though that's still rape, to her it's like, man, this guy's so not the worst of my problems. I want to be able to forgive him. And so for a couple weeks or day, I'm not sure, a couple days, a couple weeks, she just won't tell Jamie what's going on. And he's like, they bring up their conversation from when they first were married, when they didn't know each other. And she's like, do you remember, like, let me have a secret so I don't have to lie to you. And Jamie's like, I made that bargain with you because we didn't know each other. And he's like, I know you now. There's nothing about you I don't know. And I don't think we have room for secrets either. I need you to tell me. And she's like, okay, well, I will, but I need some time. I'm working through something. And so he's like, okay, I won't ask you anymore. So then he goes and asks Jenny. And Claire had confided in Jenny about what happened. And so Claire wakes up one morning and Jamie's gone. And he's gone to Brownsville to kill this man. And so this brings up a lot of anger for Claire because she's like, I'm trying to forgive him. Why did you do this? And when Jamie comes back, he's like, if a murderer is forgived by his family, does he still not have to pay? Or if he's forgived by the family who killed, of the person he killed, does he still not have to get punished? He's like, I want you to be able to forgive him, but I will still punish people for you. And there's this beautiful conversation where Claire's like, you're not my army. Like, it's not your job. And he's like, sweetie, am I not your army? Like, that is literally who I am. I am. And she's like, I wish you didn't have to be. And he's like, I know that, but it's not going to change. That's how it's been for 35 years. And that's how it's going to continue to be. And, I just love it so much. I love these two. I love my babies. I love them. Rachel also has a healthy baby boy who is unnamed as of now. They've just been calling him, is it like Boggy or something? Or Augie. They've been calling him Augie, but that won't be his name. So, but he's not named yet. But he's healthy and beautiful, and Rachel's doing good. We don't know about Marcelly's baby yet because she stayed back to have her baby, so we don't know what she had. And so things are looking really great. And then we have the best ending. The ending's the best. It's time for a little bit of a live reading. I'll read the last page of this book because it's the best. I turned my attention back to the newcomers. Though they'd stopped, the little girl had dropped something, her dolly. I could see the doll's hair, a splotch of color on the ground, even redder than the little boy's. The man was wearing a pack, and the woman had a large bag over one shoulder. She set it down and bent to pick up the doll, brushing it off and handing it back to her daughter. The woman turned then to speak to her husband, throwing out an arm to point to something. The Higgins' cabin, I thought. The man put his hand to his mouth and shouted, and the wind carried his words to us, faint but clearly audible, called out in a strong, cracked voice. Hello, the house! I was on my feet, and Jamie stood and grabbed my hand, hard enough to bruise my fingers. Movement at the door of the cabin. A small figure that I recognized as Amy Higgins appeared. The tall woman pulled off her hat and waved, her long red hair streaming out like a banner in the wind. Hello, the house, she called, laughing. And then I was flying down the hill with Jamie just before me, arms flung wide, the two of us flying together on the same wind. So, Bree, Roger, Jem, and Mandy have made it back to the ridge. We don't know, well, we probably know how, but we don't know really what's happened with them since we last saw them, which was December, and now this is June. So, it's amazing. And it's probably one of the least painful cliffhangers. You know, like, it's not as painful as, like, the last one was. There's a few unanswered questions, which, again, I'm going to make a video about that itself. But it's so exciting. Like, I'm so glad they're choosing to go back again. You can tell from book 7, you know, when they're in the future that things are okay, but they're just not as happy there. You know, like, they thought they fit in the future and that's where they belonged, but they're just not as satisfied there. Like, Roger was just as at his wit ends as anywhere else. Bree, you know, you'd think that, you know, being a woman in 1980s, the late 1970s, 1980s, didn't make her any more free than she was on the ridge, where no one was stopping her from doing inventions and creating things to make their life better. Whereas when she was a woman in, you know, the 1980s, she was still only one of 2 women at MIT when she was there. And so it's kind of cool to see that, like, she actually was just as free as she ever was when she was in the past. And I think that's so cool. I love that. So let me see. It's hard always to break up, like, what are some of my favorite parts. I am going to be making a video too about my favorite scenes from the book, because I think that will be fun. Who knows how long we'll have until Bees come out. There's speculation that it's this year, but we're halfway through this year and no date has even been put up. So my heart says it'll probably be next year at the earliest. The fact that we haven't even, you know, been given a publishing date yet. And for a book like this, I feel like it'll be probably a year out before we do. So I don't know. But as always, I mean, these books, it's impossible to even rate these. Like, they're all a 5-star to me. These books are so good. This one, I will say, it drug more than normal. And I think it's a lot of it too had to do with a lot of the stuff with Roger and Bree. Like, it's a really intriguing story of, like, getting stuck in a different time and bouncing around and everything. But it just ended up being a lot of rehashing past, which is fun as, like, to me, that's something that's fun as, like, a novella, like, filling it in. But to literally, Roger, like, I was like, okay, let me list every person we know in the past, and they're gonna show up. And they did. And that's not, like, a critique because it's fun. But it also was just like, oh, this is so frustrating. I want us to figure it out, right? So there's that. And it's more appreciative, I feel like, the more times you read it, once you know what's going to happen, then it isn't as, like, frustrating to you that it's not getting worked out. Also, there's a lot of pain in this book. A lot of pain in this book, more than there's been in a while, of just bad things happening. I just want us to be back on the ridge, and I want it to be, like, bringing in the hay and making babies. And I think it'd be really good if, like, Go Tell the Bees That I'm Gone, is if they're focusing on, like, the time travel aspect. Like, I want to know more about that stuff. I want to make a theory video about some of those things too, which would be interesting. But yeah, I loved it. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. This has been, like, my recap of everything that went on in Written in My Heart's Own Blood. I look forward to talking about this with you in the comments and in my Discord channel. Don't forget to check that out if you want to talk more, and let me know what videos you'd like to see. I'm planning next to do some character deep dives, as well as I'm going to be starting on the Lord John novels soon. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break, but then I'm going to start reading those and just diving into the rest of the Outlander content. So thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.